Good morning, everybody. Chilly. It's cold as a witch's titty out there. Now, one of the best things about waking up, I'm being as sarcastic as it's possible to be, at like 5 a.m. When you've got a puppy, is to take the puppy outside so it can pee and sort itself out on the ice cold lawn. And trust me, the dog looks at you like, are you fucking crazy? And you look at the dog and you're like, yeah, this is great. This is what I want to do with my day. So you get out there while it's absolutely at its most freezing cold, which, I mean, if you're going to learn any lessons about the cold weather, that's going to be it, right? So I don't know. Maybe it's like, in some way, it's like Ben doing his cold showers, except instead of cold showers, I'm just going out into the absolute most freezing cold, terrible, terrible, terrible cold time of the day. Probably usually after I've taken a shower, and then looking up at it's almost a full moon. I think it was a full moon 2 days ago, or even yesterday, perhaps. And you look up at the sky and you're like, what am I doing outside? This is horrible. Anyway, we've got a full menu of good stuff heading your way this Friday morning, including Ben will join us in a little while, Ben Karpinski. He's just launched his new podcast, which I encourage you to go and take a listen to. It's about what's really going on in sport and kind of where the money is in sport and what happens in those important discussions in sport that sometimes we don't see because we're distracted by what goes on the field. So it might be worth taking a look at that. There's also another weekend ahead of us. I say another because with yesterday being a public holiday, it kind of felt like it was, maybe a holiday, a weekend rather. I mean, it's always the dumbest thing to try and figure out what to do on a public holiday like that falls on a Thursday. So I'll be honest with you, I didn't do anything. It was just the most useless day. I pretty much lay in bed. I watched a little bit of series. I read a bit. I didn't do anything useful or constructive at all. And I had big plans for yesterday. I was like, well, I'm going to get this done. And now that I've finally got some time, I'll do this. And of course, you end up doing none of that stuff. So I don't think you should beat yourself up about it either. I mean, even if you have one of those unproductive days when you're trying to do work, I mean, like a normal work day for some people, today is going to be a bit of a write-off for some of us. I say that because probably there'll be people who are at work against their will today. People are looking at it going, do I really have to be in the office today? Like, I don't see the point. But I would love to know what you think of public holidays like that and what you managed to do with it. Anyway, got a couple of messages here for some people all over the place. Let's just look at those. Marco is going into surgery at 8 a.m. Ooh, dude. Good luck. Marco, of course, we've had on the show before. We featured him on the show. Marco used to be one of the fittest people in South Africa. I mean, he looked like a Greek god. And now he's learning to walk again. He told us his story on an episode not so long ago, but obviously the surgery has something to do with that. So, dude, good luck. All I can say is kill it. I'm sure you will, like you do everything else in your life. You manage to just turn whatever they throw at you into something good. So go for it, my man. We are backing you 100%. As Ruth says here, Marco, best of luck, sending our healing blessings. David Sachs is tuning in from Sydney. Morning, David Sachs. It is 2 p.m. and time for my GC fix. Well, listen, I love the fact that we do this show live because it would be weird if we did a recording and then we edited it. And, there's so many podcasts that do that. But I was thinking about this the other day. I really like the fact that this thing is live, that anything could happen. It adds an element of surprise. And, there's a lack of planning when it comes to what might actually go down on the show, which keeps things exciting. So I'm glad to hear that in Oz, there are people listening to us now. It's 2 p.m. there. So David and everybody else all over the world, welcome, wherever you are and whatever time it is, where you are. Glad that you joined us. Public holidays don't exist in the tourism industry, so it was a normal day. Yeah, that's also true. I mean, someone was saying to me the other day that they don't, not just because of work, but their whole attitude is like they don't really take note of public holidays. To them, a public holiday is just, another day in the calendar. So I suppose that's true. It's also true for people in certain jobs that we cannot do without. And I always think it's worth those of us who are going, oh, my biggest problem is to figure out what to do on a public holiday. to realize that there are people who we absolutely desperately need on a public holiday and who are doing a lot of good stuff. So yeah, we want to hear from you. Let us know. This is it's very cold. I don't know if everybody was talking about this yesterday, but when I woke up and I saw the frost on the lawn outside, it looked like snow. It looked like it was white. So they say it was the coldest night on Wednesday night, Thursday morning. So we want to, get through this as quickly as possible. There's not a lot. I've said this before. There's not a lot that keeps winter interesting for me. But I did mention, I think it was on Monday morning, that I was going to do all of my work in front of the fire, which I did on Monday. It was nice to do. You burn through a lot of wood, and it's kind of cozy and cool if you're fortunate enough in this world to actually have something like a fireplace in your house. All houses used to have them in the old days. I mean, there wasn't a house in the whole world that didn't have a hearth, right? And it's such an important thing. I mean, the Roman and the Greek gods, and before them the Egyptian gods, they had a specific god dedicated to the hearth. It was such an important part of life. If you lived in a tiny little hut, all 8 of you or 10 of you or whatever in one hut, the centerpiece of that hut was the fire. And it became a symbol for the family, for the home, for cooking, for keeping warm, for security, for rest, for all of that stuff. So we mustn't underestimate how important this stuff is when it comes to us figuring out, kind of what the things are that make us feel alive and make us feel part of society and civilization. The hearth is a massively important part of that. Tatlejo says, if you're working today, you have a manager, not a leader. Further your studies. Good morning. Yeah, it's true and it's not. I mean, you're not going to get certain jobs. You may go to the office and you may do all kinds of admin, but I can promise you now, there are people who are just not going to help you get anywhere today. It's not, in other words, you're going to be busy, but they are going to be fucking around. So try and make appointments. I've got a 2:00 meeting, which is virtual. We'll see if everybody pitches for that one. That's what I'm worried about here. I had to do the obligatory, this sinus thing, and I'm telling you, it's a sinus thing, and I think it's not just me. It's a thing lots of people have. So goddamn irritating. I mean, I'm not sick. I don't wake up in the morning feeling shit, but it takes me like a good hour and a half to just sound normal and to not have like any kind of sinus thing going on. So it's so goddamn irritating. I suppose a lot of people feel that way too, so it's not just me, but it's very annoying. So I apologize in advance for that. Cindy says, spent your public holiday drinking Mai Tais on the beach in Phuket. Today we are only slightly hungover. Cindy and Michael. Screw you guys. I am jealous to the bones in my body. Mai Tais in Phuket. I can imagine very little that's better than that right now, especially in the middle of winter in South Africa. You may have you may have all kinds of cool things happening wherever you are, but Phuket, that's about as tropical and festive as it's going to get. And don't they have a full moon party every month, which means you would have partied this week? Nico says it snowed a bit on the farm on Wednesday evening. The clouds cleared, but it went on to be -7. So I hate to talk about the weather, but isn't it true that when there is cloud cover, it tends to be a bit warmer? If it's absolutely clear, that's when it's freezing because the clouds actually keep some of the warmth in. I could be wrong on that front, but if you actually know better than that and you maybe have some understanding of the stuff that I don't, please tell us about it. We want to hear from you. This is interesting too. Apparently, let me just find this comment. Where is it now? Oh, Lenice says, in hairdressing, the client is the boss, lol. Well, there are a lot of places that I suppose make hay while the sun shines, and places like, salons and hairdressers and that kind of thing, they probably have longer hours on a public holiday because their clients have time to come in. If people have a 9-to-5 job, when do you do things like get your hair cut? It's not like you can just, book off the afternoon and say, I'm going to go and have my hair done. Like, what boss is going to understand that, right? Cliff Central, your weather knowledge is correct, says Corona's boring. All right, that's good. So if there's cloud, a bit warmer. If there's no cloud and the sky's clear, it's a problem. I want to look at a couple of stories before Ben joins us that are in the news, because we need to still pay attention, even though so much of this stuff is just so goddamn irritating. You can see what's happening with the ANC at the moment, and I know it's No Politics Friday, but a lot of people talking about all of that's going on. A lot of people also talking about what's happening in the US and in Canada and all over the world, where there's just there seems to be a huge pushback against all this transgender and woke stuff. And it's been a long time coming, so I'm not surprised to see it. But I saw in Switzerland, apparently, and this is quite a big story. I don't know how it isn't being made more of a fuss of, because just 1 or 2 years ago, this would have been the headline that would have got everybody really steamed up in that kind of community. So I'm just going to read you the basic here. Swiss town burns effigy of a trans woman. Each year, the town burns a figure based on current events. This year, they wanted to attack diversity and transgender rights. A straw trans woman was burnt in effigy in a small town in Switzerland to celebrate the end of this past April that is now getting attention in German language media. The community of Bassersdorf, which is a population of 10,700, has a yearly tradition of constructing large dolls and then burning them for Sechlauten, which is the celebration of the beginning of spring in April. So apparently this year, they burnt a figure of a person with a rainbow skirt, a red tie, a penis, and breasts, who was called the Diversity Bog. This creature had long blonde hair and makeup on one side and was balding with dark curly hair on the other. So, I mean, obviously, nobody is saying it's good to burn transgender people, but they burn an effigy every year. Like they burnt the coronavirus the 1 year, and they burnt, they've been burning things that are in the news. People are up to here with this bullshit of like a guy with a beard expecting to be called her. I think people are just sick of this stuff. They don't understand it. So it grinds against their idea of what reality is. And I know that probably the greatest division in the world today is this division between people who will say things like, live your truth and your truth matters, and who believe in a fantasy realm where they can construct an identity for themselves out of whole cloth that has nothing to do with what's actually going on in their bodies or in their minds. Well, it's all in their minds. None of it has any grasp on reality. And then on the other side, people who are absolutely dogged about what is physically real and what actually exists, and believe that anyone who doesn't take part in their picture of the real world must be deluded or mentally ill. And I think that that's going to come to a head, really. And we're going to end up in a situation where people just go, well, if you're one of those people who believes in the fantasy realm and you think you can impose that fantasy realm on the real world, then you'll be on one side of the aisle. And on the other side of the aisle, you'll be a pure realist. You'll be someone who just takes part in what is physically and scientifically provable. And you probably will get extremely frustrated with the people on the other side. And it's going to lead to a lot of these, these huge gaps in society, it's almost like trench warfare eventually, where, these people are calling those people bigots and transphobes and racists and sexists and whatever else they can throw at them. And that's their biggest, best weapon. That's the weapon that they've been using to great effect on that side for a long, long time. Whether it's true or not doesn't matter, because everything in that realm is made up. So if I just make up the fact that you are a, transphobe, even though you haven't thought about transgender people for 99.9% of your time, and I have no proof of you actually ever saying anything transphobic, I can call you that. That's my biggest weapon, and it works. And then on the other side, to have people who still believe in the truth, who stick to the truth, who think that the truth is an objective thing like gravity, and that it is provable, in a civilized, sane society, that one side is right and the other side is wrong, demonstrably. I mean, that's what happened with Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, which is what got so many people into it. On the one side, there's this person who made up a series of events in her head, cast herself as a victim, decided that the other person was a bad person, wrote an article in which she alleged all kinds of terrible things about this person, did not substantiate or prove a single part of it. And he decided, no, I'm going to go and take you to court and make you prove this in an objective place where there are consequences. And this doesn't happen for every one of these situations, right? So there are very few occasions in the real world where people who believe in the fantasy realm are forced to account for themselves. Because in normal conversation and polite company, people tolerate this sort of thing. They go, yeah, sure, she thought this thing happened that didn't, or she believes she's morally, whoever this person might be, he or she, believe they are morally superior to the rest of us because they believe a certain thing, or they've said something on social media and that gives them immediate kind of social cred. And then the rest of us who are like, well, no, it doesn't really. It doesn't prove a damn thing, and it doesn't give you any sort of moral leverage over the rest of us. Does that make sense? It's really about reality and fantasy. And everywhere we're going to have this battle going forward. And it doesn't have to be antagonistic if you're prepared to sit down and talk about it. I think people can make a lot of headway this way. They can learn about each other's outlook on the world, what they perceive the world to be, and maybe we can move forward. But I do think that there are people who are living in complete fantasy, and there are people who are living in complete reality, and they don't have a lot of common ground. So I'd be interested to see what develops over the next little while, because the more people that are in this fantasy realm and who refuse to acknowledge the biological, scientific, physical reality of the world, the harder it's going to be for us to move forward as a civilization. We need to have certain basic values in place. Like, you have to absolutely believe that there is an objective truth. Otherwise, how do you prove something in a court of law, for example? So the whole legal system falls apart if certain people believe in your truth as opposed to the truth. Politics falls apart. Some people believe, well, the government will stand in for the family I don't have, or the government will be able to provide for me and I don't have to work, or the government is there to protect me against everyone else, even if what I believe is complete nonsense. So there are people who really think that. Politically, those people have nothing in common with those of us who do, the hard, heavy lifting in society, like building bridges and putting up huge skyscrapers and building hospitals and that kind of thing, because the government must do this. And private companies have no business in that, to put it to the side that believe in fantasy. It's a very weird situation. Speaking of hospitals, there's a whistleblower doctor at Rahima Musa Hospital who's going to be given a warning letter and forced to apologize. Now, I don't know how this works, but I thought whistleblowers deserve protection. We didn't go after them. We encourage people to be whistleblowers. We say to whistleblowers, if you come forward and you help us figure something out, we will be able to make the world a better place. So in return for you telling us something about what's going on in your institution, we will not punish you. We'll reward you, and we'll try to keep you safe. Doesn't that make sense? But no, we seem to want to punish whistleblowers. So here's the story. At Rahima Musa Hospital, which you can see a picture of now on the screen, apparently a Dr. Tim De Meyer will be served with a warning letter after he blew the whistle on the state of Gauteng's healthcare facilities. That's according to the DA. Gauteng DA spokesperson on health, Jack Bloom, claimed that De Meyer was also forced to apologize to the Child Hospital CEO, Dr. Nozukum Kabai. Last week, De Meyer reported for duty again after the Gauteng Health Department lifted his precautionary suspension. So, in other words, the Gauteng Health Department do not believe that whistleblowers should be protected. In fact, the Gauteng Health Department believe they should be punished. They should be given warning letters and put on suspensions or put on indefinite leave for a period of time. We're not even treating our doctors properly anymore. Anyway, he sent a short message thanking his colleagues for their support rather than being utterly mute about his case. He was asked to apologize, as I mentioned before. He was put on precautionary suspension, and the department said the management team at Rahima Musa Hospital had agreed to work together to continue to address issues. But what I don't understand is this guy was basically explaining that this woman, Dr. Mkabayi, has been running the place very badly. And he, as a doctor who's trying to look after his patients there, is having a very tough time doing it. We should be on his side. It's clear. The guy has good intentions. He wants to help. He thinks that the place is being run badly. He reports his boss for being a bad boss. Now he's in trouble. Doesn't make sense, does it? It's ridiculous. Utterly outrageous. Apparently, this is quite a good story. On Wednesday night, Cornell Leach and Kat Swanepoel doubled Team SA's medal tally at the World Para Swimming Championships in Madeira, Portugal. Leach and Swanepoel each picked up a bronze medal. Christian Sadie finished fourth in the men's S7 100-meter backstroke, breaking another South African record in the process with a 1 minute, 15.84 seconds performance. So, I mean, some good news coming in here. If anybody could be bothered to watch the World Paris Swimming Championships, we'll take it because we've got so little in sport to boast about at the moment. But really, I don't even know what category that S7 is because there's so many different categories in para swimming. And I want to be more sensitive about this, but I actually don't know how to. So I'm just going to say, well done, guys. Get out of that as quickly as possible. 8 million Australians have been urged to turn off their lights. Well, you don't have to urge South Africans to turn off their lights. We get ours turned off compulsorily. Australia's energy minister has urged households in New South Wales, a state that includes the biggest city, Sydney, to switch off their lights in the face of an energy crisis. Chris Bowen says people should not use electricity for 2 hours every evening if they have a choice. We don't have a choice. Here in South Africa, we get ours turned off without our permission. He added that he was confident the blackouts could be avoided. So they are actually looking at an energy crisis. Comes after Australia's main wholesale electricity market was suspended because of a surge in prices. Ha! But I thought Australia was a wonderful place. It was run beautifully. Turns out they've also got energy problems. So they say if you have a choice about when to run certain items, do not run them between 6 and 8 in the evening. He said during a televised media conference in Canberra. Australia is one of the world's biggest exporters of coal and liquefied petroleum gas, but they've been struggling with a power crisis since last month. 3/4 of Australia's electricity is still generated using coal. That's just like us. It has long been accused of not doing enough to cut its emissions by investing in renewables. Listen, I've said this before. I am all for us greening energy and using sustainable energy, solar, wind, whatever else you can find. My favorite is nuclear, but it seems like nuclear is just terrifying to too many people, so we don't even pursue nuclear anymore. The reality is coal and gas are the best way for us to produce the amount of energy we need at the right price. So that is more important than worrying about carbon emissions, in my opinion. If you need energy to run businesses, to run industry, to run households, then you need energy. The green stuff is an afterthought. It is not the priority. So I'm terribly sorry to all the environmentalists, but if it comes down to me choosing whether I have electricity or not, I don't think about whether or not there are carbon emissions associated with that. And now Australia is going to feel the brunt of politicians who have more interest in the economy, more interest in the environment than they do in the economy. And let's see how that goes for you guys. It's going to be the same problem the world over, and I look forward to hearing what they're going to do about it, because this is not an easy one to figure out. Here are a couple of comments that have come through about this. My belief is that you have a branch, you're a tree. If you have a vagina, you're a woman. If you have a dick, you're a male. Well, that's about right. I mean, that's how we define the world, right? And these things may be, to some people, a bit confusing, but to me, it's perfectly clear too, Vincent. That makes a lot of sense. What you said is the right thing. Silicide says, as a person who identifies as a helicopter, I also find these identity people are an itch to society who don't deserve recognition. Well, listen, everybody deserves recognition. And we're not saying people need to be excluded from society just because they have a different outlook on the world. We welcome them in, but that doesn't mean that the whole world must now convert its perspective to suit you. If you're one of those people who likes to understand things by the bullshit, then hang on a second. Hey, Alice, come here. Bloody dog chewing things it shouldn't. If you're one of those people who believes that, you can identify as an attack helicopter, it doesn't mean that the rest of us have to. We don't have to go along with your belief. That's the thing that I think is important. Nico says, true that, Ruth, and you only have to hang on, I can't see that. Lenice, I think it all boils down to people not teaching their children that actions have consequences, even how small it just gets brushed off. Yeah, that's part of it. I think maybe parents have definitely, some parents have lost their minds. They just don't know how to make sense of the world. There are parents all over who are just, they're lost. They want to be friends with their kids. They want their kids to have, everything go right in their world. They don't want any hardship. They want to support their children and be their best friend rather than actually raise them properly, which is a lot harder. We'll have to see. Yonder says the new season of Survivor has a guy who was a woman but had to go as they were on mercury medication, and a vegan who didn't want to eat crabs and decided to starve. Why not eat the trees, I ask. I don't know how you could still be watching Survivor. I don't know how anyone watches any reality TV anymore. It's just something I've never understood. Even when I was on reality TV, I never watched it. Anne says, we need more imagination in science. For instance, how many hypotheses did you have yesterday or this morning? I'm not sure what you mean. I'm not sure what that means. That's real nonsense. Speak in sensible sentences, because I don't think the rest of us can follow. Rebellious Ruth says the government has no clue. I heard John Steenhuisen's comments about the cancer of this government. Hard truth. Yeah, we're also a little bit exhausted talking about how crap the ANC is. It's just one of those things that's now regarded as some kind of insight, some kind of brilliant realization. It isn't. I'm fairly sure that when I wrote my letter to the president in 2010, this stuff was not mainstream. And I'm not trying to claim any kind of Nostradamus level prediction power. But I will say this, like when I wrote that letter about all the things that the government can't do properly and how shit they are at it, I got just blowback. I got people saying, shut up, what do you know, you racist? And how can you criticize the ANC? Is it because you're white? And who you're young and you don't know anything about the world? Because this was 2010. I was like, all right, well, you can hate me, but that doesn't help your argument. If you want to argue with me about how great the ANC are, bring your info. I'm happy to have an argument with you. But don't attack the man because you don't like the argument. Attack the ball. Like, have a proper argument with me. I'm perfectly happy to have that. And that was a letter that got me into some trouble. I remember, criticizing the president back in 2010 was regarded as very, very unbecoming. That wasn't looked upon as something that people would or should do. And now suddenly it's what everybody does. So I'm just a bit bored with talking about how crap the ANC is. I think we all are. And it's obvious. So when someone like John Steenhuisen says this stuff now, it's like, well, we've been here already, dude. We've been here for a while. One other quick story I want to throw in here. This is quite interesting. Kevin Spacey has appeared in London in court after being charged with sexual assault. We haven't heard from or seen Kevin Spacey for a long time. He was granted bail on Thursday during his first appearance at a London court in a case where he's obviously being charged with 5 offenses, including 4 counts of sexual assault. He spoke to confirm his name, date of birth, and his London address. He was granted unconditional bail after his lawyer said that he would need to return to the US between the court dates to work and see his family. The House of Cards actor was charged last month with 4 counts of sexual assault against 3 men, alongside a 5th charge of causing a person to engage in penetrative sexual activity without consent. Spacey's lawyer told the court he strenuously denies all allegations of criminality. Hey, the charges he faces includes 2 counts of sexual assault against a man in London in 2005. You know, 2005. I have to say, like, you have to bring these charges faster. If you're going to be, and I know that there are difficult things for people to deal with when they've been sexually assaulted, but the more time you let go between when it happens and when you report it and when this person is then brought to book for their crime, the less evidence you have. It's really a he said, she said, or in this case, a he said situation. And how do you know? Like that long after 2005? I can't even remember what happened last Thursday. They've proven over and over again that human beings have no ability to remember things actively and factually. They just don't. Things could happen a week later and people have different versions of the story. So you're helping nobody in a case that you need to win against a quite rich and powerful Hollywood actor if you bring it so much later. Anyway, there's a 3rd count of sexual assault, also in London, against a different man in 2008, and a final count against a man in Gloucestershire. The 5th charge of non-consensual penetrative activity also relates to a 2013 incident. This guy was busy, man. Kevin Spacey was just doing all the things. Ben is here. Hey, Ben. Morning.
Gareth, there's a saying in Cape Town, you can't throw a rock in that place without hitting a gay model that's had Kevin Spacey somewhere around his genitalia.
Did he do a lot of his predatory stuff here? I didn't know that.
Well, his lawyers were strenuously denying. He was strenuously, I think, pushing boys on yachts in Cape Town. It's quite well known.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, he had his peak when he was like really, really famous. And I think that's another thing about fame, which we obviously see many, many stories, is that you think you're untouchable, and you also think that you get away with everything. So yeah, I mean, look, 2005, I agree with you. You should be more current to these kind of things. But sometimes when you have this much power and this much money, you can strenuously, I love that word, like, of all the words that they could use to try to sound innocent.
Yeah. Strenuously is not a great word for this.
No, it really depicts the kind of actions that he was committing. I'm really sorry, but I seem to be sick. Like I've got this nagging cough, which is just so fucking annoying. And no matter what, so from time to time, I might.
Are you doing your morning runs or walks?
No, I haven't exercised in 2 weeks. It's driving me absolutely fucking insane. Like, really is, because I've got this sort of like chest thing, and it's very, very deflating.
Well, I was complaining just now because I was sneezing and blowing my nose the whole time, and it doesn't matter. I can wake up an hour before the show, but it takes some time for me to like get my head, and this sounds terrible, but to get my head working properly. Like and I'm not sick at the moment. It just sounds like I am because first thing in the morning, I just don't have like a good sinus situation. I don't know what it is. I can take medication for it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I don't want to do this. I just want to feel good when I wake up. And it's also just a winter thing.
I know. It's such a winter thing. And I feel like I can't, because I'm leaner nowadays, I have less fat. Let's be honest. Fat is insulation, right? And I feel like I'm fucking cold the whole time. Like, I go to bed with 2 proper sort of blankets, and then like I've got 2 cats that basically cling to me like their survival depends on it as well. But every single night, I am. Obviously, because I'm talking about it now, it's flaring up. But every single night, I wake up and like I wake up for some strange reason. Like the duvet is not on me. I'm cold, and I think like I've just regressed 2 days of health. Fuck, it's just it's absolutely deflating. And it's weird because like, you have the sinus thing. Whenever I get sick, which is obviously seldom, it all manifests into my chest, into this dry, heavy nature. So that's like my default sick setting, which really, really sucks. Yeah, new dog.
You haven't met my new dog. This is
not
Alice.
yet, no.
Alice, just behave yourself. She's running around this office of mine, and she's chewing everything that she shouldn't. And I'm just terrified she's going to bite through an electrical cable, and then we cut the show. So
yeah, that's what small dogs do. They have to bite things all the time.
Are you doing the cold showers?
No, because I'm so fucking scared of just exasperating this or whatever. No, so all the things that I love in life, Gareth, I'm currently not doing other than eating steak, and that's just like one of the joys left. But no, I mean,
I love that. Can we just talk about that for a second? Because we sometimes get carried away talking about all kinds of things in the show, but the one thing we don't do is talk about how great it is to eat steak. And I just absolutely love. I had for lunch on, I think it was Monday or Tuesday. I had a steak for lunch. That's all I ate. Didn't have anything else. There was no need for anything else. You don't have any veggies or any starches or any carbohydrates or any of that shit. Just a steak. It was perfect. That's what you do every day.
It's one of my absolute joys is steak, cooking steak differently. I'm getting really into the whole you get bone marrows and you cook those. So like the best way I love to do a steak is actually just to bake it. Also, obviously, it depends on the cut, because if you get a big, thick, juicy cut, you need to put fire to it, put a big flame to it. But if you get a decent sort of cut, nice ribeye, you put it in and you bake it, and you bake the marrow bone on the side, and then you put a little bit of garlic and a little bit of salt on that, and you scoop the marrow out, and then that, along with mushrooms, you create like a bed. So it's bone marrow, mushrooms, and then you put the ribeye thinly sliced on top of that. That's good. Nice. That is pretty much the pinnacle of life right now.
So how do you bake a steak? You put it in the oven for how long and what temperature?
You literally you just put it into a baking dish, into the oven, put it onto 225 minutes. There you go. You can also put vegetables with that. You can put sweet potatoes, whatever. But it's no mess, no fuss. You're not going to splatter up a pan.
So in your mind, that is superior to cooking it on a frying pan, for example.
Yes, definitely. I might not have the best frying pans. Also, frying pans are quite messy. But first prize obviously is to be outside and have a grill with a flame going. I don't really like gas cooking. It just feels it feels very American.
I like a flame that's made of wood. Yeah.
Yes. And I like the smoke and the fact that you can be outside, all primal. That's great. And then also throw in some liver from time to time, and that's good. But it is
fucking expensive. Like red meat is so expensive. I realized this the other day. I went and bought the steak that I cooked this week, and I was like, Jesus, you're paying over 100, sometimes 170 rand for a smallish piece of meat. It's not that big.
Yeah, I found that my local Pick and Pay near my office, I don't think they know how to properly price ribeyes, so I just go there and buy them. Because
then I will drive all that way, because what I lose on fuel, I'll gain on the meat.
I've bought meat from enough places to know that 139 rand for a kilogram of ribeye is pretty cheap.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. But I just feel everything at the moment, Gareth, is just like one big fucking bear market. All the money that you invested, fucked. Mm-hmm. Petrol price, fucked. No. So cold.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but it's this is
really hard to be optimistic about this shit, because it's so annoying when I'm an optimist. I can't help myself. I always think tomorrow is going to be better than today. It invariably is, if you think that, because you put your reality out into the world and it happens. But I have to tell you, I'm feeling the same. You look at what's happening to the world economy and how it's being just mismanaged by these fucking politicians.
So bad.
And everything that has happened since coronavirus, except the virus, has been worse than we expected it to be. The virus is the only thing that was better than we expected it to be. And by better, I don't mean that I don't care about all those people who lost their lives. But what I mean is that far fewer people died from the coronavirus than we anticipated, right? All the projections were that millions and millions of people would die. Turned out to not be nearly as bad as people thought, especially here in South Africa. Thank God. Obviously, every life lost is terrible and a tragedy. You have to say that, because otherwise people think you're going, oh, it's great that people died. Obviously not. But it wasn't so bad. Everything that the government did in every country in the world, with the possible exception of Sweden, everything they did made it absolutely markedly worse.
Yeah, exactly. Which is then
they took a bad situation and everything they touched turned shittier. And the virus was like the only thing that was better. The only thing we could celebrate after 2.5 years is like, yay, that coronavirus wasn't as shit as we thought.
But I just want to know, like, on this is maybe a different conversation, but on what grounds did we ever think it was going to be that shit? People weren't bleeding out of the eyes. They weren't fucking dropping out of their own anuses. You know, it was just a really fucking bad flu.
So I heard this interesting thing. You're absolutely right. But I read this interesting thing the other day, and it comes down to what we've been talking about so much on the show, about how people are so compliant. Let me just read this to you quickly, because this is a research study that I read. So apparently, they did a mass psychosis scenario where they tested a group of 100 people, right? They said that 30% of people are instantly hypnotized and fully compliant in a situation like that. So in other words, they'll believe whatever the experts or people that they suppose they trust tell them. So it's like kids. Kids will believe their parents. They are much more susceptible to believing what you tell them than adults. But we're talking about adults now. And 30% of adults are just like children. They will believe anything you tell them. So you could say, the sky is actually orange. And they'll go, oh, okay, the sky's orange. And they'll believe you and they'll go with it, even though they can see for themselves that's not the truth. So the other 30% are instantly repelled and become non-compliant. So those are people who go, I'm sorry, I just don't believe you. Which has become a very, it's considered quite a dangerous position for many people to take, because they just think that you are opting out of the general narrative. And for many people, they are just opting out of the general narrative, but there are skeptics. So you've got a bunch of people who are hugely compliant, 30% of them, another 30% who are completely non-compliant and are skeptical, and then the other 40% are fence sitters. And this is like the normal bell curve, right? You've got that kind of thing. So it's a matter of who the 40% side with. That's what matters. It's not really about the 30% on either end. And that 40% are either frightened into submission, which happened a lot during COVID, or they refuse to comply and they become antagonistic to the system. And so far, COVID has been a really, really good way of manifesting precisely what this is. A lot of people I know were in that 40% who were fence sitters, and they changed sides through the course of the pandemic. And they've changed sides about all kinds of other things that are going on in society too. People in that 40% are the ones that we need to pay attention to, because they will change their opinion based on new information and better information. So it's just interesting to me that 30% of people will always just go along with whatever they're told. They're like sheep. The other 30% will do exactly the opposite of what they're told, because they're just rebellious. And I can't help thinking, like, I'm in that 30%. And then you get these people in the middle who really matter, the 40%, who need to be persuaded. They need to be convinced. They want to be shown evidence. They're not just going to buy it.
But that 40% is also losing their mind because of social media and media narratives on top of that. But I would say, I have a theory. It's just a theory. It's not like your well thought out article, but I think there's things about compliance. Two things. It's a very feminine characteristic of a human being, compliance.
That's true.
Women generally, so if you look at how masculinity has been demonized in the last 20 years, I think that's another kind of indication of where that's going. Another thing about compliance is I think we as a species are too educated nowadays. Academia has softened the brains completely. It's all great and well to go and learn something and get a skill and a degree and a qualification. But academics is, it doesn't make you a doer in life. It makes you a thinker and a procrastinator and a knower, but you don't actually fucking do anything. If you look at so people are so absolutely educated and they're so smart and they're like know-it-all, but it's just made them so compliant. And compliance
they can't do things. They can understand a whole lot.
Courage of conviction. Yeah, there's no actual, like, they don't stand for things. They're trying to find out things. And when you try to find out things all the time, you actually do fuck all with your life, other than just go with this sort of like meander through things, because that's what the media are doing. All these narratives are doing. They're making you meander through bullshit.
If you look at the kind of jobs that people are talked into by society, and I say talked into, the kinds of jobs that we look on in society as being superior, like, being a doctor or a lawyer or a financial whiz, or, the big thing at the moment is an entrepreneur, but an entrepreneur is a different thing because they actually have to do things, right? If you're a real entrepreneur, you have to do things. It's not about thinking things. Everyone has ideas. No, very few people take those ideas and actually turn them into products or services.
Yeah.
The careers that are looked upon favorably by society now, medicine, law, engineering, that kind of thing, those are largely things that require academic learning over a prolonged period of time. The problem I have is that, and I think it is clear that a lot of this is a masculine, feminine thing. Women are real information gatherers, whereas men are information hunters. They very specifically zone in on like a certain area of knowledge, and men also are the ones we rely on in society to make things, to build buildings, to create institutions, to make fires, to fix cars, to do all that kind of shit. We don't rely on women for those things. There are women who do those things, but they're rare and exceptional. And academia does it. It attracts a certain kind of human. It attracts a certain kind of a learner and gatherer rather than a hunter and fighter. And there just isn't that much place in society for those men, the masculine men, the ones who hunt and fight, and there aren't a lot of places left for them. I mean, we don't even have real wars anymore. You look at what's going on in the Ukraine, and it's horrifying to some people, but that is the default setting for humanity for thousands of years, is people fighting, blowing each other up, shooting each other dead in the street, wrestling for resources. That's humanity. That's our history. Now we look at that and we go, oh, that's appalling. How could that be happening? We don't like it at all. It puts us in a very uncomfortable position, because I do believe we've been feminized in society, men and
hugely,
women, and to a very worrying degree for those who believe that both are important for a healthy, sustainable civilization.
Yeah, we have to have the balance. But if you think about it from what you were saying about building, so
yeah,
I don't mean to skew some of these conversations into raw masculinity, but essentially, like men, as in the men who build. And
it is a preoccupation of yours at the moment, which is fine.
Yeah, because I just generally believe this is how we got to add to society. I'm not going to talk about fucking fashion trends and other kind of things and how my feelings are today. That's not important. No one cares about that. But if you look at, I was reading something last night that, the whole thing about masculinity is actually just maturing a lot of the time. It's growing so you can have a role in society to build. So real kind of proper men, and I'm not saying guys who beat their chest and literally eat their arsehole of an Impala while it's running, but real proper men are actually just creators. That's all we are. So we create families, we create buildings, we create jobs, we create businesses, we create opportunities for other people, and we create the framework of society.
I just want to throw in the proviso that the greatest creators of all are obviously women, because they are the ones who give birth to and create life within their own bodies. That is a superpower.
No, well, completely. They are the ones that give life. But I'm saying like in day-to-day creation, you've got to create everything in life. And the problem with a lot of men nowadays and the whole femininity thing that you speak about is that men have become consumers. So they consume all kinds of shit food. They consume all kinds of shit information. They're not creating at any stage. And when you take away the purpose of creating of men, you have these very compliant, absolutely valueless consumers. And if you look at going back to the point of our conversation here, is that people have become far too compliant. But that's what compliance is. You're just consuming what you're meant to do. So we need more creators, less consumers, Gareth.
Yep. That's absolutely right. I mean, Stink Mina says people have become so smart, but they can't even plant their own food. Well, I mean, you ask people with university education in the Western world, where does steak come from? Some of them don't know. They've never seen a cow. They don't know how that works. I mean, this sounds ridiculous, but it's true. Like they've never actually understood the bloody process of preparing a steak. They don't understand this stuff.
But look, in a lot of countries,
where does this come from? They go to the supermarket. They don't know anything about what happens before that. They just consume.
But if you think about people who are like city-driven as well, like a lot of the modern sort of first world populace, is that they don't know what wildlife is. They don't know what the countryside is. They don't believe in that kind of stuff. They're almost like allergic to it. And I was thinking about something else the other day. Like, I started watching this series on Netflix with Zac Efron called Down to Earth, and it's quite interesting because obviously,
Hmm.
so I think that guy, obviously because he's so incredibly good looking, I think life was just far too like fast and loose for him, and he's probably got into drugs and other things. Speculation. I'm not saying he did.
Sure.
So this series feels like it's just a junction in his life where he wants to do better. So he finds this guy who wrote this book about superfoods. I forget his name now because he's a vegan. So they go around the world and they find these sort of like things of how you can reconnect yourself and live a healthier life. And I'm always looking to find new, smarter ways of doing this. Obviously, too much information is a bad thing. But this guy was just talking about, and I keep reading it in various other sources, but how often are you actually connecting with the earth? You think about like when you live in an apartment or a city, whatever, you're constantly wearing shoes. And if you are barefoot, it's in the confines of your cement dwelling, really. At no stage do you ever actually touch ground. And, there's this whole thing what this guy was saying about, the electrolytes and the connectors of actual earth is very good for people because it distresses them and it gives them a sense of being. Whereas if you're constantly above that, this is why people are so anxious and they're so stressed and they have these things like imbalances. So not only do people not know where food comes from genuinely, but there's no connection with the earth whatsoever.
Well, you speak of connections, and this is really where we tie a nice bow around this conversation because we've gone full circle. It turns out that according to that same study, and we've inadvertently happened upon a truth here, the research shows people in cities tend to be a lot more compliant and a lot less cynical and a lot less self-sustaining than people in the countryside. In other words, if you live in particularly the inner cities, you tend to be a lot more compliant than if you live out in the middle of nowhere because you have to fend for yourself. So people who live out in the rural areas, they don't have an option of relying on government or on having things delivered to them or, going to the shops when they need something. They have to make and figure out and determine this stuff for themselves on a daily basis. Therefore, their brains are active in a way that people in cities are not. If you're sitting at home hungry this evening, you'll Uber Eats something to your house.
Sure.
And you'll be sorted. And you won't have to think about cooking or baking that steak that we spoke about earlier, right?
Well, exactly. And Gareth, to make it even
about living in cities.
To agree on your point and to make it even more full circle, Kevin Spacey was strenuously molesting more people in cities because of compliance. He also saw that. He was like,
I'm going to be molested by Kevin Spacey, live in the country.
I'm going to strenuously press on the behind of that man in the city because he'll be compliant to it. Be compliant to my fame, compliant to my strenuous actions.
Oh my God!
See, there we go. Like 20 minutes, we've already figured life out again. It's not hard, this thing.
All right. Well, what we want to talk about in the next hour, and this is really interesting. Ben discovered a whole lot of information about books being banned in the US particularly. But I'm always interested in this conversation because the closest thing to a religion I have is one sentence, and that is free speech. Voltaire's old saying that I may not agree with you, but I will defend to my death your right to express yourself. And banning books is always a bad sign. When people ban books, it's always a bad sign. Now, there are obviously arguments that books shouldn't be necessarily put in front of children if they're inappropriate for that child's age. There are obviously books like Mein Kampf, which has caused huge amounts of shit through the pattern of 20th century history. But to ban these things is to make them even more powerful. And in almost every situation where there is a book banning going on, there is some scurrilous politician behind it, someone who is trying to manipulate society, do things for themselves, exclude free thought and the sharing of ideas. If a book is filled with horrible, hateful shit, it should still be published, because then we can find out what is going on in the heads of people who are horrible and hateful. How else are you going to know? You're only going to find out what? When they pitch up at your house with a machete? Better to read the book. Better to know the book is out there. You don't have to take it on as your philosophy. I mean, We could say the same about newspapers. There are probably stories in the editorials of most newspapers that would drive many of us crazy. We don't need to read the wild leftist opinions of some East Coast, some West Coast American professor of gender studies to know that that's absolute nonsense. But she should still be able to publish her stuff. We should still have a place for her to be able to have her say about how she thinks the world works, even if it's nonsense. You're not going to protect people by banning things, but we'll find out more about this in a little while because Ben's done some actual research here, and he's looked at reasons for book bans, which states ban the books, and who the advocates of this stuff are. I think it'll be interesting to have this conversation.
Well, it always comes back to who has the right to do these kind of things. Like, I think it was yesterday or sometime this week, Turkey are putting into place that if you are guilty of misinformation, you can go to jail for 3 years. But who are the people who are jailing you for 3 years of misinformation? The people who are the most prone to misinformation.
Yeah, correct. Because they do whatever they're told by the state, right? And they're compliant. That's the compliance there is the law, and the law there is lock people up if they say something that you disagree with. The law in South Africa used to be black people and white people can't marry. The law in South Africa used to be black and white people can't live in the same neighborhoods. The law in this country was that there were areas for blacks and areas for whites, and that whites and blacks shouldn't mix at all, that blacks have to carry around a pass. That was the law. Now, a compliant person would have followed those laws. Yeah. Someone who thinks for themselves would have gone, hang on a second, I'm not going to follow those laws. They disagree with my values at every level. I'm not a supporter of those laws. Thankfully, for most of us who have lived post-1994, we've grown up in a world where the laws are a little bit more fair. There are still some laws which really bother the hell out of me, and I bet you can guess which ones they are. And this government that we've currently got are making a lot of stupid laws, which I will say are stupid. But the fact that we have this conversation, we can talk about it, is very powerful and important and quite liberating. The day that they stop you from talking about which laws are stupid, then you got a problem.
But don't you find it interesting in the context of where we are now, what's happened over the last 50, 60 years or whatever? What you said there is that if you were compliant, as in you're a good citizen, you believed that whites and blacks should be completely separated. So when you look at it like that and go, okay, so being compliant was actually really, really bad. So you were a bad person and you were actually a big shit by being compliant. But now people are still telling you to be compliant. It's like, well, hang on a second. We just worked out that being compliant is not actually good. So like, never is it okay to be compliant.
He's dying. He's he's dying.
I'm defiant. I'm not complying with this fucking illness.
Oh my god. There's you got any plans for the weekend, by the way? You doing anything fun this weekend?
It's one of those beautiful weekends where right from Monday I was like, right, this is it. I'm doing nothing. The US Open golf is on. There's the URC rugby final, so it's all South African. Cool. So Stormers versus the Bulls. I'm going to go hit a golf ball for the first time in 6 weeks. I'm going to go for a lovely walk. I'm going to cook. Yeah, it's just I'm really so happy alone. I really am morphing into you, Gareth. It's really I'm actually okay with it. I really am.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
Well, like, you always said to me. You always said to me that like you were the only person that I ever knew that ever said the words of I'm actually quite happy by myself most of the time. I really am. And then as I'm getting older, it's so difficult to describe this to people who maybe want to be part of your time or don't agree with this, but it's actually so fucking cool. I've never realized how cool it is until recently. Being by myself is so fun. It really is. It's great.
I agree with you, but I do think you've even gone beyond my level of liking to be alone because, I mean, I'll invite Ben to and Ben will say, no, I don't drive further than 5 kilometers from my house on any given day unless there's in it.
Fuck yeah, I don't say that. And I don't say no. I've been to your house a few times, Gareth.
No, you have.
I've always made an effort. I've got like a 60% record.
I'm not saying you're not making an effort, but you can be quite reclusive.
Very.
Own it.
And it's just, I am owning it, and I feel it's finally set in that it's actually making me a better person. It's finally it's like the stupid fucking illness aside. How there's this thing I learned this week as well. It's called monk mode, It's when you don't tell anybody. You don't tell anybody about what you're doing in life. You just go quiet. You disappear, and you work on yourself so that whenever you want to come back, you're better than where you were. So I go in and out of monk mode.
So you're in monk mode at the moment?
I think I'm always relapsing into it, to be totally honest with you.
Okay. Well, it's not all bad. I think that when you need to focus on something, when you've got a goal in mind, monk mode is probably the best mode for you to be in. But for a lot of people, it's almost like a self-imposed torture, and they think there's going to be a reward at the end of it. You know, sacrifice without a goal is about as pointless as things can get.
Oh, I totally agree with you. Yeah, I mean, look,
Oh yeah, we've already gone over 7. Let me just take the break, and then we'll come back after this. We could get into a whole conversation about this too. By the way, we want to hear your comments. You can drop us one on the YouTubes. We're live also on Twitter and Facebook this morning. Ben, Gareth, and we've got a guest joining us a little later on to talk about all kinds of things, including something that's going to drive Ben crazy, the Obi-Wan Kenobi TV series. But he wants to talk about turning urine into beer and all these stupid reaction channels on YouTube, which, I mean, some people love them. I don't hate them all, but there's some of them that are really stupid. Brett Rogers will be joining us in a little while.
Hang on a second. Has beer become so expensive that we got to drink our own piss now?
Make it out of urine, yeah. That's what's happened. Shit. That's it. All right, so we'll be back with that and a whole lot more in a little while. The only thing that you can guarantee we won't bring onto the show is Kevin Spacey. Lucky you and your asshole. How lucky for
that. But just keep watching our...
Some people want to forget all about the 80s. Some people would prefer not to remember the hairstyles, the movies, the fashion, those pants we used to wear. God, those pants we used to wear. Some people would prefer to never hear an 80s song ever again. We are not those people. That 80s show. Music, movies, obscure references, and so many unchecked factoids. Fridays, 9 a.m. on Cliff Central. People say we're stuck in the 80s. Like it's a bad thing.
Yes, that 80s show. if that's your thing. And by the way, a lot of people asking why we have this break in the show at 7 and we don't just carry on through. we need to, when we do the podcasts, we need to separate hour 1 and 2. It just makes it easier for people. It's the way we've done from the beginning, and people like to kind of separate the two. So we have to create a break. It sounds really stupid, but I have to explain that to some people. Sometimes we'll play a promo or something. Sometimes we'll throw some client stuff in there, but normally it's just like a break so we can create the new podcast. All right.
I've got to ask, Gareth. I've got to ask. The 80s show has been going on for a very, very long time. I mean, how many times can you play Come On Eileen? What else are they going into 80s, like the scandals? Do they talk about 80s fashion? Like
you must hear, like they've got such interesting guests, people who used to be a big deal. I'm not going to name any of them now, but if you ask, like, what has happened to, Kim Wilde from We're the Kids in America, well, they've probably interviewed her because she's available now. She's got fuck all to do. No one's asking for Kim Wilde except for the 80s show. So it's cool that they can do this because, I mean, who did they talk to the other day? Chesney Hawkes, I think they spoke to. I am the one and only. It was like a one-hit wonder for that guy. And I don't think anyone's thought about Chesney Hawkes for the last 30 years. And then that 80s show comes along and they're like, hi, Chesney. Oh, my God, I'm so glad you called. No one's called me in like 40 years.
I haven't done an interview in 33 years. That's amazing.
He's like, wow, this is so great. And then they become like really good friends with Barrett and Dory and company. Like they're all in a chat group together. And then there's all these 80s icons, people that I used to think, wow, they are so cool. They're the most famous people in the world. Now they're like having conversations with people on my staff. Ridiculous. Anyway, it's a good show. You got to listen to it. And I mean, I'm an 80s music fan, so it's not the only thing I listen to. Thank God. But there's some really good shit there. All right, so things to talk about this morning, and this is something Ben wanted to introduce to the conversation, so I'm going to let him explain it to us. Just how did book banning become a thing that you were interested in? Where did you start like finding information out about this? Do you watch a YouTube video or something?
No, I think it all started with that whole DeSantis senator basically talking about how there was a whole banning of the governor of Florida. He was taking this whole thing about like kids are being groomed by pedos and starring teachers and stuff. And it kind of actually, I kind of sort of rolled from there. But a lot of the Republican states in America are banning books. And I always thought like, obviously when it comes to like sanity, the Republicans are the only ones that still have some. And then I started seeing all these book bans. It's like, okay, so you guys are all fucking loony no matter which side you look at it. But a lot of the books that are getting banned are all sort of like LGBTQT
Yeah, don't even try and get it right. No.
Alphabets. So a lot of the books are is based around that kind of stuff and based around people writing about racism. So people who are getting banned are mostly black male authors and gay authors.
Oh wow!
So then if you look at it from there, then it goes back to this whole conservative belief that you shouldn't be listening to people like that. And they're getting banned essentially from schools, from what the things that I looked at. So essentially, people don't want to go to school. Republican senators, and Texas is the biggest state, they banned over 1,000 books. Who the fuck's got time to ban over 1,000 books? But what they're doing is they're saying that they don't want this filth, this pornography, to be in the libraries of young, impressionable learners. So there's a couple of questions there. There's a couple of questions there because, in theory, good conservative values would look at that and go, yeah, why must they be reading about things that they probably shouldn't have to know about at a young age? I totally get that. But then there's also the whole, like, again, like, is there a tribunal that's been put together where it's like, how gay can you go until you've hit the roof? Or like, how much racism until you hit the roof?
Let me just go straight to what bothers me about this. This is all pointless. Like, if a kid has access to the internet, what are you doing banning books?
This is exactly where I want to go with this.
You think that this is the 1930s where the kid has to go to the local library to find out about anal sex? Kids are going on the internet now on their phones, which the parents are paying for, and they're looking for all the freaky shit they could find, and their friends are telling them, hey, did you see this YouTube video, and it leads you onto this site, and then you can get this hardcore porn. I mean, that's the thing they should be on about. Banning a book from a library is like telling people, we're going to ban shoes because people are running too much. You could still run without shoes. In this case, you could still find all the porn and the filth that you shouldn't find at the age of 11 without having to go to the local library. What are these people? This is where conservatives are really stupid. They do not understand that the world has moved on from public libraries and newspapers of renown and that sort of thing. People just go on the internet now to find stuff. This is an interesting survey. So they're asking, who are the people who are trying to ban books? And this will tell us a whole lot about how it all works and what it is all about. Okay, so here, first of all, share of book censorship attempts in U.S. libraries, schools, and universities in 2020 by the initiator. And again, I got to say quite clearly, I don't have a problem with people keeping certain material away from kids, right, Ben? And none of us are saying that's not this stuff that kids shouldn't see until they're of adult age and consenting as adults to that kind of information. I don't believe that kids should be exposed to porn before they're 18 years old, under any circumstances. If you could possibly keep it away from them, then do. Because I do think it messes their heads up.
But Gareth, I think on the whole thing about pornography, the senator of Texas, he calls the literature pornography. But essentially, it's not like just opening up and you see double fisting and all that kind of stuff. It's stories basically normalizing how you can do these kind of things. It's basically normalizing grooming. It's normalizing these kind of things in society. That's what they are calling this pornography thing, just to put it clear. So, right, it's one thing seeing a visual, but reading a compelling story about how you should be seeking this kind of behavior, I think, is slightly more dangerous.
All right. So 50% of the people who are advocating for book banning in libraries, schools, and university in 2020 in America are parents. So, you know what? If you're a parent and you want your kid to not be exposed to this kind of thing, then A, raise your kid properly so that they actually have a grip on how the world works and that they're not suddenly confronted by something and it ruins their whole idea of how the world works. Right? Makes sense. So do a better job parenting. And if part of that is parents saying to their local school, hey, I don't want you putting filth and literature that kids shouldn't have into your school library, good. But I do think, again, they're missing the point because you can't ban this stuff on the internet. It becomes very, very difficult to do that. 20% of the people banning stuff are patrons, which would mean people who actually still go to libraries. I haven't met one of those kind of people for 20 years. I don't know anyone who belongs to a library. I don't have a library card myself, and I love books. So I don't know who these people are. 11% of the board and the administration. And now we start getting to authority. And this is where I become a major cynic and skeptic when it comes to any kind of ban on anything, because the minute boards and administration or political and religious groups are involved in banning books, then it gets very messy. I don't know who the 10% of other are, but you know what? Banning a book's generally a bad idea. Even worse idea if you think that banning books is going to stop people from finding information out on the internet. Here's another interesting thing. They've banned more than 700 books in Texas. They are the state that has banned the most books. Pennsylvania's next, Florida's next, then Oklahoma, Kansas, Indiana, Tennessee, Virginia, Missouri, Georgia, then New York. Interestingly enough, it's 12
but exactly.
books.
Look at that drop off. 713 for Texas and only 12 for New York. You wouldn't think that with the way that they dealt with certain things recently.
So I don't know. I mean, here's one last chart, and then we can discuss this a little bit. Book challenges on LGBT plus topics soar in the U.S. So apparently, most common reasons for U.S. book bans and challenges are sexual content. Okay, look, kids have got to find out about this stuff. We used to have, what do they call it? Life orientation or guidance or whatever it's called at school. Do you remember that? Where there would be some teacher who clearly hadn't had a lot of sex themselves. It was always
pretty much zero.
Yeah, they always chose
talking
those
about
ones.
boners.
Yeah, and it was just so gross and uncomfortable and weird and horrible for everybody concerned. But sexual content is a good reason for kids to not be exposed to certain books. And again, this is down to the parents. You raise your kids properly, we're not going to have this problem. Offensive language. Now, I hate to be the bearer of bad tidings here, but You just have to go into any rap song's lyrics. Lizzo put out a brand new song this week called Girls. It's about the stupidest song I've ever heard in my life. But she had to change the word spaz because apparently that's very ableist and is mean and offensive to the what do you call it? The physically challenged community or whatever. So every other word in there was pussy and fuck and everything else. So, I mean, start with Lizzo, guys. Banning, Huck Finn because there was some racist tropes in there because it was based on like the 1800s. That's a waste of your time. And I don't think any kids in the US are reading Huck Finn, frankly, at the moment.
No.
Unsuited age group is a good reason to keep people away. It's not to ban the book, but to keep them away from that book until they're ready to read it. Religious viewpoint. Hey, if you want to force your religion down someone's throat, go for it. If you don't believe in doing that, go for it. I don't think that it's right that anybody should be indoctrinated into a religious way of thinking for their whole lives. And certainly after they've left their parents' house, they should be able to make all kinds of decisions around religion. But if you believe it's a values thing, sure, then raise your kids that way. LGBT plus content, only a small amount really of the book banning is because of that. Violence,
yeah, but it's on the rise though, Gareth. It's on the rise. The alphabet's 14% up.
Yeah. Then they put violence, racism, and the use of illegal substances because those three are not really big problems by comparison with the others to parents anyway. That's what we're talking about here.
Sure. So I was looking at this like, on what grounds should a book be banned? Like, if you make it part of the kids' curriculum, a book about Stephen who wanted to be Sally, and basically you're indoctrinating kids into knowing if you hate your penis, you just chop it off. I'm speaking in extremes here, obviously. If that is like, if that is what you learn and you're forced to learn and you write tests on it, then I can almost see like, okay, that book should probably not be part of a kid's curriculum / life. Therefore, take it away / ban it. But if that's not the case, there is no grounds to ban these things because I don't think people will be reading them. They don't give a toss. They're not going to go around to the library and go, ooh, what can I fill my mind with today? Because as we ascertained in the beginning, they'll just use their phones for that.
Listen, I just hate it when people use kids as the vanguard for any kind of activity.
Totally. It's another great example of this.
Do not use the children. I understand that kids are a very sensitive, delicate part of society, and we need to be careful what we feed them, whether that's dangerous ideology, whether it's violence, whether it's sexual content. You need to be careful around kids, but don't use kids as your soldiers in an argument where you want to ban books or where you want to change the direction of society or you want to do something dramatic. Do not use children. I can't respect that. And I'm tired of people going, but the kids, when it's actually got nothing to do with the kids. They're actually just against it themselves as adults, and they will stoop so low as to use the children as an excuse to get what they want politically. I think that's appalling. That's really appalling.
Totally.
If you're a parent who does that instead of raising your kids properly, well, then fuck you. We're not banning anything because of you.
Yeah, and kids are so transient anyway. Transient, sorry, they're not trans. Like when they're 10, when they're 10, by the time they're 11, they've kind of forgotten a lot about stuff. It's a bit like buying them clothes. You don't buy, they'll like something one day and then they'll be gone the next. So again, it's just bullshit. And like as Gord always said, get a real problem. A lot of these politicians, and again, it goes into these political cycles, right? Because they want to be relevant, they want to get reelected. So they're making a huge deal about something, and it's just bullshit grandstanding over and over and over again.
So I'm kind of conflicted about this, not in respect of banning books. I've always been against that, and I'm always going to be against that. I do believe that certain things need to come into play when it has to do with people at a very young age, for example. But whatever content, it can be hateful, horrible shit. People have written terrible things in the past, and they've also written really clever things. And if you think about what the Catholic Church banned, work by Galileo Galilei, which posited outrageously that the sun was in the center of our solar system and not the earth. And he was very nearly burnt at the stake for that by a bunch of people who were religious fanatics who wanted to ban his book. I mean, thank goodness we still have the writings of Galileo Galilei and so many others, Copernicus. These are the kinds of things that we needed to know. And if people try to ban things, they just go underground.
But Gareth, this is another sort of piece of cancel culture, which just shows you how stupid cancel culture is. We still haven't got the fundamental reaction which should be in place of cancel culture. Dispute, argue, discuss. These things should be what we have as humans, not banning. That impulse reaction of banning something must be taken away from the human psyche. And this is yet another example of how we are failing so dismally at that.
Well, let's bring Brett in, because he's been on the show once or twice before, and he's always got an interesting opinion on these things. Plus, he's got a whole bunch of things he wants to talk about, and we'll get to those in a moment. Hey, Brett, how you doing, man?
How's it, Gareth? How you boys doing?
Yeah, good. How are you doing? What's been happening?
I'm
what did
great,
you do with your
guys.
public holiday, by the way? Anything useful?
Well, I was in it's not that interesting. It's a really long story, but it's not that interesting for public radio. I went to buy a TV.
Should we leave it?
Because
You went to buy
I'm moving house. Yeah, I'm moving house.
Because you didn't have a TV license, right?
And do not have a TV license.
Yeah.
Well, why not, Brent? It's the right thing to do. It's the right
I've
thing
heard
to do.
that. I've heard that. They've said.
I'm still getting messages from this dipshits telling me that if I pay half of my settlement now, I'll only have to pay another half next year. Like, get fucked.
Finally, they're telling us what the right thing to do is. I appreciate it. I was actually, while you boys were talking about that, I was wanting to know, did this come up because of Margaret Atwood's unburnable book action thing? Did you see that?
No, I don't know anything about that. Margaret Atwood, of course, is the famous author of that book, which was like about these extreme right-wing religious fundamentalists who put women in like red dresses and forced them to have children against their will. Handmaid's Tale, that's what it's called. So she's famously that author. Yeah, what happened with her?
Interrupting you there. Yeah, so she, I think it was. I'm going to get the publication house wrong, unfortunately, but I think it was Random House, and they worked with her on creating, because her one of her books, The Handmaid's Tale, has been banned numerous times in the States and around the world. A number of other books as well, which are she's a great author. And so they did this project where they made an unburnable version of The Handmaid's Tale. And there's a really cool promo video of her with this massive blowtorching this copy, and of course the flames are not destroying it. And then they auctioned it off for a free speech organization, and it pulled in $130,000. I thought that was really cool, and on topic with your guys' conversation.
Great. Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't read The Handmaid's Tale. I know that a lot has been made of it by political actors and institutions, and there are a lot of people who are very upset about The Handmaid's Tale because it kind of paints religious fundamentalists in a bad light, like their own actions haven't for 100 fucking years or 1,000 years or more. But Margaret Atwood herself, I have to say, if she was alive in the 1600s, would have been burnt at the stake. This is what she looks like. And you know what people used to do in the 1600s? Any woman who looked like that would definitely be called a witch and would have been put on the funeral pyre, right?
Wait till you put a blowtorch in her hand. Then you really see some witchery. It's beautiful. Just this old lady. It's amazing. But I'm interested in what you guys are talking about. Oh, you go ahead, Gareth.
What do you think of book bans? I think it's just such a stupid thing. It's like talking about what we're going to do with gramophone records in the year 2022. We've so moved on from the idea of book burning. Now what people do is they cancel each other online, right?
I think it's an extremely difficult position. I think it makes no sense to ban books. I think also it needs to come down to the education given by society that will guide people into having quote unquote right thinking. There's nothing you can do about it. You guys have already said about the internet, so we're going to be exposed to it. So we need to educate ourselves and our youth. I hate that thing as well. And to a healthy. Yeah, just to have healthy views. I was even a little bit interested in what you guys said about, like sexual content kids shouldn't be exposed to that. And I was just wondering, if they're going to be exposed to it, sure. Let's not encourage that they're exposed to pornographic writing or visuals. Sure. But we need to have more education. Like, I never got taught about sex from my parents. Not because my parents were repressed or anything, but just what happened. And I think we need a lot more of that conversation amongst our youth to make it less taboo and weird, because then you can assess it better rather than going, it's all evil.
Yeah, it's so
Yeah,
difficult.
I mean,
I don't
yeah.
believe it's anyone's job to teach anyone else's child about sex. You know, it's just like it's tough. And of course, they're kids who grow up now, who don't have parents, who don't have both parents around them. Who teaches them? And if they're going to learn from their friends, they're going to learn terrible things, right?
Well, I mean, ultimately, sex should not be taught by the Catholic Church or Kevin Spacey, because I think, you know, if they're the ones teaching you about sex, life's going to be uphill from there.
Oh my God. Yeah, listen, I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm just glad it's not my problem to deal with because I don't have kids. It's so difficult, such a complex place. And of course they're going to encounter this stuff. It's not like you can put them in a hermetically sealed envelope and the kid only learns about sex at 18. I think that would be weird. I think there are a lot of weird people who only find out about sex even later than that and who are a disaster to themselves and to society. But who should decide? It's not me.
Maybe that puppy should decide.
Yeah, it's a cute puppy, hey? Isn't this a cute puppy?
Oh
So
my
sweet.
goodness.
Yeah.
Adorable. What's its name, Gareth?
Alice. I'm keeping her on my lap because otherwise she chews things around the studio. She's been behaving herself for the last few weeks, but suddenly she's got to the stage where she thinks everything is chewable. So what can you do? All right, I don't want to talk about how people should raise their kids because none of the three of us have kids. So what the hell's the point of that, right? And how are we going to have any insights that are worth sharing? What I do want to talk about is something that was on your agenda for this morning, Brett. And I've been watching the Obi-Wan TV series. I know Ben has turned completely against Star Wars from being a big Star Wars fan. He's decided that it's horse shit because he found some other author who wrote Dune. And Ben thinks Dune is superior to Star Wars.
Other author. You got no respect. Other author. The original author of the best sci-fi story ever created in humanity is the actual way you describe Frank Herbert. But carry on.
Whatever. So Disney's milking this whole Star Wars thing because they bought it for like billions of dollars, right? They have to make their money back somehow. So they've got Ewan McGregor coming in here. They've brought Darth Vader back from, you know, the original series. So this is a period after the first 3 episodes. And Vader is kind of still interesting at this point. And they're bringing in a whole lot of new characters. And there's a huge pushback by some of the Star Wars fans about some of the characters. And we don't have to get into that this morning. But what are you enjoying about it or what are you not liking about it, Brett? Because you're the one who brought this up.
Oh man, I'm just loving them giving me what I want. You know, I want to see Darth Vader. I want to see, you know, how he came about. I want to see that in between spaces between the episodes.
Right.
I think they've done it beautifully. I thought Hayden Christensen in the last episode looked very funny with the CGI. But
I haven't seen it yet, so don't spoil it for me.
Apologies, I won't. Then what did I enjoy about it? The pretty pictures, Gareth.
Okay.
No, it's beautiful, and they're milking it. You're right, they are milking it, but I think they're doing it well. Well,
they so fucked up that the last 3 movies, right? They really screwed those up. The ones with Rey and the rest of these characters. It was just so vapid, and they took people like Luke Skywalker and Han Solo and Leia, frankly, and they just turned them into these weak milksop characters that, you know, in the original Star Wars, these were our heroes, and they turned them into these really pathetic old people in the last 3 movies, and those directors should never be allowed to direct movies ever again. They're just absolutely shit. And then they did bring out, to their credit, they brought out that Rogue One, which was actually pretty good. And frankly, The Mandalorian's been pretty good. So I'm happy with where it's at the moment. I'm kind of with you on this.
I think it could be much worse.
Gareth, have you ever been to one of those sort of like new money areas or like a hastily put together golf estate? You'll see someone who's built a structure and then they've built an add-on and an add-on, and then that little bit over there is purple, and then this bit over there has got like its own fence. This is what happens when you don't have a plan, right? And George Lucas never had a plan. He had characters that he put together, which kind of worked at a time where coincidentally people wanted sci-fi and didn't want army movies anymore. And this is what we've got, unfortunately. We've got Disney now milking these withered teats of a story. And basically, what they're going to do is that they bring it back together with pretty pictures, which Brett just confirmed. So This is why, it was always going to run into some roadblocks, unfortunately, because there wasn't a good structural story from Lucas's side. It's just well packaged sci-fi, and that's all it is. And one day you'll admit that, Gareth, and then we can have this conversation again like adults.
Well, Corona's Boring says, Ben, did you watch the director's cut of Dune? They had an extra 3 hours and 12 minutes of really large spaceships landing and taking off really, really slowly.
Oh, wait. Amazing.
Have you seen the new episode of Dune, Ben?
No, I've only watched the movie that came out last year.
Oh, that's what I meant. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. Sorry, I just lost you there for a second.
Oh, we both did. Say that again.
Shit.
I just thought it was awful. Oh, have you not heard me? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No, we can hear you now.
I just thought it was really slow and disappointing. I'm just okay.
Sorry, Brett. You're just breaking up there a bit. You said it was the greatest sci-fi movie you've ever seen. I agree. I think basically it was just like the character structures. It was more believable. There was more urgency. I totally agree with you. I just think that it can go somewhere now. There was plot lines that I really enjoyed.
Urgency?
Yeah.
What urgency?
No, see, someone is.
Unfortunately, he keeps breaking up. So I'll finish what he's saying. It's really great how there was this real family dynamic, and then there was an actual force, not that Star Wars was playing around with. Yeah. I mean, look, Gareth, you don't need me to go on about it as well, and Brett to go on about it. It's just better than Star Wars. We can draw the line.
Okay, great. Oh my God. I'm going to try and get Brett back on here because while he was there, it was fun. Oh, there you are. Okay, now I think we've reset the connection, so you should be all right for now. What's this bullshit about turning? Brett, what's this bullshit about turning urine into beer?
Oh wow, it's so
interesting
crazy.
Segue.
I mean, yeah, it's a nice change. It's in Singapore. So Singapore have been cleaning their liquid products, so urine, etc., stormwater drains, and turning it into what they call new water. So when they do that in South Africa and other countries, they turn it into like non-potable water for like cleaning roads and stuff, but they're actually turning it into drinking water in Singapore. And they're using that water to make beer. I mean, it's a little bit of a, I don't know, marketing stunt, but I think it's an interesting angle.
It's not directly urine into beer. They're basically taking wastewater and then they're using it for all kinds of things. And one of those things is beer. Not very appetizing as a thought, though. I mean, it doesn't help that beer is the color of urine in any case, right?
No, it doesn't help. And you know what? I think maybe it's just, look, all these stunts are interesting and it's a PRable thing, but I think it's an interesting PRable thing to like promote the recycling of water to actually make it usable. And, I think that's probably important, but I think it's just a stunt. They've got a whole bunch of influencers saying how good it is.
I have to tell you, I think like a lot of the environmental stuff is just a stunt. I think so much of it is just plain. It doesn't make a fucking difference at all. If you're a huge power station like Modupi or Kusile out in Mpumalanga and you see how much shit they're pouring into the atmosphere, you and I could drive 100 kilometers less every week. We could separate our rubbish. We could use less electricity. We could switch off everything in the house that we're not using all the time and be absolutely militant about it. And we wouldn't make a dent in the amount of damage that those big power stations are doing. We wouldn't make a dent. As it is, they shut down periodically and we don't get electricity anyway. So we're almost forced to try and be good environmental warriors. And it makes zero difference. I think a lot of this stuff is just pure virtue signaling. And a lot of the environmental lobby is about like unattainable goals. In other words, they don't specify what we actually have to do. They're like, you must try really hard. Our carbon footprint's too high. Use less of this. Use more of that. Don't eat that. Eat more of this. But they don't give you an end goal. Like, what's the point? Do we want to develop into a civilization where, I don't know, we go back to agrarian stuff like, Gandhi wanted to do in India, for example, where we abandon all technology and we go back to the land? Is that what they're looking for? Are they looking for just less use of everything? In which case, don't expect the economy to grow. What's the goal?
That's it.
Like, I don't know what you're working towards here. This environmental lobby throws all these things at us and makes us feel bad about being alive and using electricity. and eating meat, but they don't tell us what we should do and why we should do it. You know what I mean?
Wow, that why is really interesting, Gareth. You know, it's I suppose it's like a lot of being told what to do things. Like, tell me why I'm doing it, and I'll most likely do it. I mean, we know make it cleaner, but I don't know. When I was told to clean my room, I was like, cool, I'm going to shove things under the bed because then it's clean,
Correct.
right? So that's what we're doing now. We're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
That's a great analogy.
No, I mean, this environmental lobby also, you know, it's kind of like the racism thing, because there's never going to be a point where we don't have any racists. There's always going to be a couple of racists hiding under a rock somewhere, right? There's always going to be like people who are Chinese factories, for example, are not going to stop producing huge amounts of carbon emissions because they're busy making all the shit that we buy in the rest of the world. They're not going to stop. So when you put an unattainable goal in people's way, like you say, we've got to defeat racism, or we must shut down all carbon emissions so we can regenerate the planet or whatever, you're essentially just creating something which is unattainable. So people keep working towards it. It's almost like the religious impulse. You know, God creates you sick and commands you to be well. You know, that the essence of sadomasochism is basically that you are diseased and I'm going to command you against nature to be well. It's an unattainable goal. It puts people in a position where they're constantly chasing something that they can't catch. And it's not good. This is not good for our mental health. It's not good for any of these causes either, because it makes them seem like they're chasing things that are just not necessary.
Wow, that was depressing as hell. You're right.
No, but I mean, why put something in your list of things I'm going to do today if you're not even sure what the result is and whether or not the result's going to be good for you? Why bother? And that's what's unfortunately happened with the environmental lobby. It's happened with a lot of causes in the world.
And there's a lot of
people
big lies that are going out there. I don't know if you saw what happened with Deutsche Bank and with FIFA. Like last week, so there's this greenwashing lobby who have been on the attack against companies, excuse me, that are lying about their greenness. And in particular was FIFA with Qatar, because what Qatar did is that they said that their stadiums were all carbon neutral. But what they did was they analyzed the value of the stadium over its entire lifespan. And those stadiums are going to fall into disrepair instantly after the World Cup and are not going to be utilized. So it's an entire lie, and they continue to lie to us. You know, it's one thing to tell us we need to do things, we need to recycle, we need to do that. But we are having huge, massive organizations who have all the power, not listening and actively betraying all of us. So I don't know what they expect from us.
That's interesting. I mean, Ben, you've spoken about like the World Cup and Qatar. We spoke about it years ago when they won the bid. I mean, this is just not a country that's honest about anything. In fact, they've been using slave labor in effect from the beginning here. They're just exploiting the hell out of this. Apparently now the World Cup's only happening later in the year because it's too hot in July and August. Usually it's always in July and August. Is that right?
Well, exactly. World Cups have to accommodate international seasons, so they are in the European summers traditionally. But this one's going to be end of year because it's the one time in the desert where you don't actually melt into the floor. and all of these stadiums basically are air conditioning units that they're creating. So there was all these really cool stories of like, they're all modular, okay? So we're going to build it, and then we're going to break it down, then we're going to give it to Africa because Africa's poor. No, I mean, we all know that the FIFA stadium like palaver. None of these stadiums work unless it's like in Munich and then Bayern use the stadium. Like in Brazil, they sold all those stadiums. They are now infested by like rodents and semi-tropical plants and things. People don't use these kind of things. It's all absolute horseshit. And the thing about Qatar is they've been very smart. They've been sport washing themselves, which societies are trying to do hard. You know, like last week we spoke about that whole live golf thing. These guys are doing the absolute most they can do to sport wash their countries, and Qatar is on the end of the cycle of that because no one talks about the human rights violations there anymore. No one talks about these kind of things because they are so down the path. You know, Saudi will be there in 5 years. You won't even know who Khashoggi is after the fourth running of this tournament, and Dustin Johnson wins it. Like, Jamal, what? Does he play golf? No, I don't care.
Yeah. Right.
The sport washing going on is worrying, huh? It's really worrying.
But-
Formula One
But
as well.
I really believe that FIFA kind of started the sport washing, and it was Uncle Sepp again, one of the most visionary leaders of modern life. He started sport washing because he knew there was massive margin in it. It's like, hey, you countries with lots of money, you're dodgy as fuck. Let me introduce you to this thing called football.
Yeah,
Wow, Ben, that's interesting perspective.
it's
Yeah,
true
it's
though.
kind of true. And you know, even this week, that dodgy old fuck, Sepp Blatter, he still hasn't gone
He's
to
still
prison.
alive.
He's not done anything. He was given a fine or a suspended sentence this week. Like after all of the back and forth, him and Michel Platini, who had these dodgy deals where Sepp was giving him backhanders and then other people were like playing along, they've been given suspended, slap on the wrist kind of thing. So yeah, that's the end of that. Sport has washed countries and money's changed hands.
I think this is where cancel culture has developed from. I think it's because of this, because we have all these enormous politicians and business people who are beyond the law, and we are watching them in front of our eyes betray us. And so we start lowering our standard towards finding somebody that we can attack and we can blame and we can put in a prison. So like, cool, we can't put Sepp Blatter or Jacob Zuma into prison. We can't put the Guptas into prison, probably. So we're going to fire this oak over here who said something nasty, what he shouldn't have said. But, I think that's how it comes, because we are facilitating the success of these things. We are facilitating FIFA. We are facilitating Formula One because we want the World Cup. And I think it's very sad watching these guys.
Totally. But it's such a good point, because people always go to like the sort of more attainable kind of thing. Like whenever there's a domestic, if there's a domestic cheating scenario, okay, where the husband's definitely fucked some other like side chick, who gets the major brunt of it? The woman, because she's defenseless and she's easier to fight. It's like, well, you asked for it. You obviously were doing this. You're obviously doing that, because they're easier targets. I totally agree with you. I think that's exactly what cancel culture is. We wish we could take on bigger things, but unfortunately, the guy on Instagram who said something mean or dispirited, we'll take him on because, we can cancel him. Hooray.
We're just empowered, man.
Yeah. You go for the lowest hanging fruit, because also the aggressor in all of these situations is actually quite weak too. So they're not going to go after like governments or major corporations and things, because God knows they'll lose those battles, right? So instead they just go after their friends on Instagram. It's it's so pathetic. It's really, really bad. I just want to throw this in quickly and see what you guys have to say about this, because there's quite a lot on the agenda this morning. And by the way, we want to hear from you. Just drop us a comment in the YouTube comments if you want us to throw in some other things that might be on your mind this morning. We want to hear from you. But I love this. This is an actual story from the Daily News of Hungary. The 78-year-old mayor who married a girl 60 years his junior shared his secret. And there's a picture of this old codger with 2 bottles of what looked like white spirits in his hand.
Is that his secrets? Is he holding the secrets?
I think that's what he's holding. But let's just do the maths here. So he's 78 minus 60.
18.
He's dating. I know, he's dating an 18-year-old. This is very concerning that this horrible-looking old man, this dodgy as fuck, grizzly old, gnarled grandfather, great-grandfather, whatever he might be, is dating an 18-year-old, and he's holding 2 bottles of white spirit. And this is a perfectly acceptable headline in Hungary. What do we make of this?
Well, he's the mayor. He's the mayor of the town.
Yes, so he's a respectable person in that town.
Well, Hungary is a total right-wing conservative nightmare, right? It's like the worst of the worst in the States. So they have got a baseline of like, well, there's grass on the wicket, I reckon. It's a mess. Wow. Talk about abuse of power here.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm 42 years old, so I've heard some terminology in my life.
He's a mayor.
But also, like the story is, it's like, what's his secret? As in, he's basically trying to sell the story he's still desirable. Dude, it's not a secret. It's just absolutely perverse and disgusting. It's like saying 72-year-old man finishes marathon in record time. Then you ask the guy what his secret is. Enslaving some 18-year-old with probably poor liquor and like giving her dad like $100. That's not a secret. That's an absolute diabolical strategy.
Is he literally saying it's the booze? Is that what they're saying? Like, that's the answer?
I think I haven't
White
read the rest of
spirits?
the article. I was so put off by the headline, and of course, my subscription to Hungary Daily is I only get to
Is
read the
lapsed.
first 5 stories. Yeah, I don't get to read past story number 6 or 7, so can't really tell you. But who cares what his secret is? We know it's something revolting
Disgraceful.
and probably exploitative. All right.
I mean, if you're old, you want to go live in that town, though. Let's be honest. If you're 70 and down, you're luck.
Yeah, it sounds like a good place. But then how is that any different? We talk about a 60-year age gap, and that's pretty extreme. But how is it really any different from people who are living among us in South Africa who've like bought a Russian bride, or they hire like machoshas from from a poorer part of town and they call themselves blessers? How is that any different?
It depends on the power structure. The power structure, right?
Well, I don't know. I don't think so. I think this is just how humans have always behaved. Like there are some, and it tends to be men who do this more than women, although there are women who are very, very rich and hire good-looking young men to be their companions at a cost. And how is that any different from the blessed society that we've got going on here? Because that's a big part of South Africa. If you want airtime, you got to sometimes suck a dick.
You know what is funny? There's a person in the comments there. You're talking about blaming the wrong person. He says, "I think she's the gold digger." She's 18 years old, bro. She's 18 years old. Give her a break.
Gold digger.
Are you crazy? Yeah.
Wow,
So he's literally blaming the person who's under the abusive relationship for being in the abusive relationship. This is the world we live in.
Well, I also don't know how it works in Hungary, because I think in Hungary, if you're 14, you've already got 2 kids. I could be wrong, but maybe the mayor is traditionally there's a festival. Maybe it's like the Hungarian reed dance, where if you can down a bottle of cheap vodka and you're still standing, you get to marry the mayor.
It's also a really sexually exploitative country, Hungary, as far as
just like Ukraine, yeah.
But I'm saying every country, people probably look at us with our blessee situation. They probably look at us and say that's an exploitative country. I mean, are we any better? You see these guys in very fancy cars with fat government tenders in their back pocket, and they're unattractive, they're out of shape, and they've got some beautiful woman whose whole business is extracting money from him because she's hot and young and attractive, and she pretends to love him for as long as it takes for her to get the cash that she needs. I don't see how that's necessarily any different to the situation in Ukraine, where you send your eldest daughter to South Africa to strip in a strip club. It's the same thing, if you ask me. I mean, they are consenting adults. We're not talking here about a kid being exploited, which is obviously different.
What is, at least we know, or we don't necessarily know, but we hope that in a blessed relationship that there's some sort of contractual happening, right? Cool, you're my young person, and I'm going to give you this money, and I support you, and pay for your education. And then, but this 78-year-old mayor in a Hungarian village, probably, what is he providing? He's providing white spirits. That's what he's providing. At least this person is in a Camps Bay, mansion. Good
no, they're not. No. A lot of blessees in South Africa are really doing it. I was joking for airtime, but honestly, that's what's happening. So how's that any different? White spirits may be a better option than airtime. At least you can numb yourself before the 78-year-old climbs on top of you. It's just gross. Carl says,
I love the way we ended that story on a chord.
How the fuck is this guy still a mayor at 78? What are you talking about? Joe Biden is president of the United States and he's 78. What are you talking about? I mean, there are a lot of old people who's just way past their sell-by date. Can we just agree, like the 3 of us this morning, and it'll become law, obviously, because we're powerful like that. Can we just agree? Well, what does that matter? We're having a conversation.
I'm just making a law.
Don't impose your whiteness on us. I want to say that we should have a maximum age. You know how we have a minimum age for certain things? Like you can't have a gun, drive a car, vote, unless you're over 18. I think there should be a maximum age at which you just aren't allowed to run for public office anymore. And I'm not being ageist, because I do think that, there are people who are a good 78 and there are people who are a bad 78. But I think once you get to, like your late 70s, you can't have your finger on the important buttons anymore because your reflexes are very slow. You just aren't as mentally agile as you might have been in your 50s, 40s, 30s. I just think there's got to be a maximum age for this stuff, and I don't think that's hugely controversial. Do you?
No, not the slightest. If you are paying attention in life, we eventually become parents to our parents because they become quite adult and slow, and they're not as smart as they used to be. So if there's a minimum age, the movie Benjamin Button also taught us this. There's a reason there's a minimum age because you're not capable of doing something. When you get old, your regression is the same as your very stunted progression. Like it's both sides. Like sunrise and sunset have the same kind of light, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same thing. Once you get to an age, sorry, you're done. You're not entirely sure when you're going to make a poo next. You can't be trusted.
Yeah, you can't. If you can't be trusted to make a poo at the right time, then I'm sorry, we can't let you be in charge of the nuclear codes.
So what's the age?
That's the hard thing, right? How do you determine that age? I mean, do we do tests on people? Do we
And then also, women tend to be, more agile. Immensely at an older age, so maybe they get to 70, but dudes get to 65 or something like that.
I was going to go 70, 75.
70, 75.
You reckon?
Eh? Wow, that's quite old.
We're not. By the way, we're not banning people from doing normal things. We're not going to stop you from doing your shopping. I mean, we're not going to stop you from driving a car. Even there might be arguments for that, but that's not what we're talking about. I'm just saying. Important public office like that creepy old mayor in Hungary or Joe Biden. I just think you can't be in your late 70s and be making important decisions for other people. You can make all the decisions you want for yourself. No one's going to get in the way of that. No one should ever tell you at any age to make decisions for yourself. Obvious exceptions being when you're a very small child and you're in your parents' care, and if you've completely lost control of your bowels or your mind at some advanced age. But if you're healthy and you're not under duress, you should be making your own decisions. I'm talking about people who have to make decisions for the rest of us. Like, should you be a lawmaker if you're in your late 70s? I don't think so. I think those people they come from a generation that is so far removed from the technological one that we're living in now that these are the kind of people who want to do book bans, to go back to where we started this conversation. Well, you two sound like you're really...
No. I was waiting for Brett to say something. I just think if something has a minimum age, like driving a car or drinking or whatever these things are, you must apply a maximum age to it because I'm tired of these old fucks fucking everything up. And I think everyone is.
If you look at the States, right, it'd be interesting to consider, old what's-his-face, the orange guy. He was really old, and now Biden was 78 when he was elected.
Yeah. Yeah,
Biden's
the oldest man ever to be a president.
Wow.
And he wants to, by the way, Biden wants to run again. Biden wants to run again, which means in 2 years, he will be, I think he'll be 82 by then. And that means if he wins, he will retire from the presidency at age 86. Now, there's just no way that should be a good thing for anyone. Already, he sounds like he's half off and half on. He's very confused. His speech is often garbled. He starts shouting at people like a cranky old man a lot of the time. Ben, are you waving at your cat?
Yeah, she's literally right above me, yelling at me.
That's a really interesting point you're making, Gareth, because I was looking at stats recently around the hi, kitty cat.
Look at that.
Wow, that is very cute.
That is cute.
She's just judging me from a high.
Sorry, Brett, you were saying?
The average, I was looking when the Russians invaded Ukraine. I was looking at, for reasons, the average age of governments around the world.
Yeah.
And I think the Ukraine was averaged at 38. That was the average age of their government. That's, not after everybody got, killed. But before that, so they were already and they're already advanced nation with all with technology and with philosophy and thinking. And then the oldest nations are Germany, America, England, and these are the nations controlling the planet somewhat, And it's going to be interesting to see what happens when all of these old fuckers start dying. because
Yeah.
the vast swathes of the government just start disappearing, then who's going to take over? The TikTokers are going to take over. That's what's going
Oh, Jesus. God help
Oh,
us.
God,
'Cause,
no.
yeah.
to
By the way, you wanted to say, and we've got like a few minutes left of this, and if you're wondering where George is, he's not going to be joining us this morning, everybody. So if you were concerned that George was not here yet, he's not joining us today. I think he's on an
It's
extended
too old.
long week.
Too old.
But you wanted to.
Unfortunately, George is too old.
You wanted to talk about these reaction channels on YouTube, where people like react to stuff, and you don't watch what they're actually watching. You watch them and their reaction to it.
Yeah, I love those things, man. I really, really love it. Maybe it's just because I'm an old bachelor, but like, it's nice to have friends, and sometimes my friends are the people laughing at the same things I'm laughing at on the TV. I really think it's the future of commentary. I think it's the
Yeah.
future of sport commentary. I think it might even be the future of just TV show commentary. That I think TV shows are going to need to start releasing a reaction channel along with it, with people that they've hired who watch along with you, so that you can enjoy it with others. The first one I ever watched was this guy called Hip Hop Head Reacts to Rage Against the Machine for the first time, and guys, is that not the greatest moment in somebody's life? Like when I first heard that, I wish I had a camera on me when I first heard that seminal album, and now you're getting to watch other people experience things for the first time. And it's beautiful to watch. It's really cool.
I get that. I saw a guy who's a big watch fanatic reacting to like Pharrell Williams showing off various watches on TV appearances that he's been on. A really cool, and he's an interesting dude. Like he knows a lot about the watches, but there's a very serious element of just sheer joy and excitement that you get out of watching his reaction videos. But the other thing I love is these unboxing videos. And obviously it's only if you care about what's actually in the box. But someone sent me a clip of someone opening up some sound equipment, like a mixing desk and stuff. And this woman just she takes this little scalpel and she opens up the plastic covering.
Ooh,
and she very carefully
nice.
folds it open, pulls out this beautiful piece of equipment, and she shows you different angles of it. That's very cool stuff. I don't have a problem with that. Ben, you look like you don't care about this at all.
No, especially if you're poor, because you can't buy it. So it's
Right.
like watching
Watch
porn. No, but that whole reaction thing, it's really great. It's not going to really take off in sport, unfortunately, because people swear and you can't broadcast it. But if you look at the guy who obviously is the greatest on YouTube, Mr. Beast, this guy spent his entire life working out what works. So he has the main channel, and then he's got all his videos translated into Spanish. And then he's got, because he just knows that he can basically get all the eyeballs in the world. This is the guy who basically puts all the money back into his videos. So he recently made his own chocolate factory to recreate the whole thing. And one of his channels is actually just pure reaction videos. So him and his staff, all they do is every single one of the videos is them reacting. And it is super smart how this guy just gets everything right on YouTube because he's dedicated his life to it.
That's pretty cool.
I could spend a couple of hours just talking about YouTube stuff, to be honest.
Me too. It's the absolute greatest thing.
How much time do you reckon you spend on YouTube in a given week?
A week? I'd rather do a day because that'll be easier to work out.
Easily 2 hours a day.
Oh, easily. I mean, I think I'll probably spend 35, 40 minutes in the morning, then maybe another 30 minutes before I go to bed, and then during the day, quite a few hours. A lot of it's research, but research lands up, rabbit holing.
Yeah, sure. Listen, it again, to go back to the library analogy that we were talking about earlier, this is having access to the world's greatest library. And if it's reaction videos, how's that different from reading a fiction book? Some fiction is good, some fiction is bad. It's all in the eye of the beholder. And if this is the stuff that makes your day happy and puts a smile on your face, go for it. Also, you may learn some really amazing things while you're on YouTube. I don't look down with intellectual snobbery on people who learn things by video as opposed to people who read books. There's nothing superior about someone who listens.
That's changing the world, dude.
Yeah, I mean, someone who reads a book, someone who listens to an audiobook, I don't really draw a distinction between them.
Well, I mean, the way education is changing is remarkable. The perspective that people have on education and educating themselves has changed so dramatically with the advent of YouTube. In the
Yeah.
past, you had to go and study something and intentionally go do something. Now people are watching a 15-minute video, practicing it, doing it, becoming adept at it. Boom, next thing. It's really
Exactly.
impressive.
And you see people who can play the guitar after watching like a couple of YouTube videos. I think that's phenomenal. I just want to wrap it up because we've already got to 8:00. This has been a lot of fun. And Brett, it's been nice having you on as well. And Ben, I think that this is something we should all install in our houses because obviously it's going to be a really big magnet to attract people to us. It's a cock fountain. Someone put this
we were
up.
looking for one of those.
Someone put this up in a town square in I think Belgium, and
Hungary, definitely hungry.
you think it's Hungary? You think it's that mayor who
Little
we
town.
saw earlier?
Fuck,
It's like
that's a girthy dong. Hey, there's the secret right there.
yeah, it's a big horse cock
It might just
fountain.
be a shower, not a grower. You don't know what that's going to,
That's actually Kevin Spacey's house. A friend of mine in Cape Town went there. No, that's Kevin Spacey's house.
that guy's going to pass out.
So there it is. There's what you finish your Friday with, is a cock fountain. Aren't you glad you listened to our show this morning? You learned things
Definitely.
here you won't even know on YouTube. All right, Brett, have a happy day. Ben, have a great day. Everybody have an awesome weekend. We will see you on Monday, 6 a.m. bright and early. Enjoy your Friday.